There we are. So hiya everyone. If you haven't attended an Elevenses before, they are a really informal way of us having chats and information passing information back and forward between people that we're working with or people who have an area of specialism that we think is helpful. Every Elevenses that we do is recorded and will go up the week after on the CEC website. So if there's anything that you feel you need to come back and take another look at, you can come and come and watch it there. If there are questions that come up, I'm happy to continue to read the chat box as Peter and I are discussing things. So if you have a specific question that comes up as we're talking, feel free to drop it in there, and I'll do my very best to drop it in. You'll probably know if you've run a Zoom yourself, there's like a lamentable amount of multitasking goes on from this seat, because I'm running the recording, trying to make sure nobody else is waiting to get in and asking the question. So if I'm a little disjointed, you'll have to forgive me. So today we're with Peter Evans, and I don't know, I always describe you as sort of an accounting ninja and kind of ex-HMRC, which seems to me to be like a whole set of qualifications in the dark arts, you know. Peter, would you like to introduce yourself in a way that's less me and more you?
Well, I think that pretty sums it up, actually. Well, that's how I've always been. That's how you've always described me up there. So,
yes.
No, I mean, basically, I have an accountancy practice. But my background is very much tax focused.
Mm-hmm.
I was an inspector of taxes for many years with HMRC until I changed sides. And now I help, basically I try and sort of give advice and help businesses really hang on to as much of their hard-earned money as they can. Perfectly legitimately, of course. Yeah. So yeah, and I've done a lot of work. I used to work a lot with Medea down in London, and then since she moved up to Scotland, she sort of dragged me up there to sort of join in there. So which I'm loving. So
once you know us, we never let go. That's the thing with CEC people. It's like once you're in the book, they're like, oh, I know who we could ask. So today we're going to run till I find that people find it useful to have a solid finish time. So it's a 40-minute session. We'll be done by 22. But Peter had said to me just before we started the broadcast today, that if you have questions that are coming up that haven't been dealt with, or that are secondary, you know, questions that come up once you've listened to them, what we'll do is we'll make sure that you can contact me and I'll pass his inquiry on. So we can always make sure that we're answering individual questions if it's something that you don't want to talk about in a public forum, or it's something that, I don't know about you, but I'm always about an hour out of the broadcast when I go, oh, that would have been a great question. And then, you know, so initially, I'm just throwing a few things at you, Peter, that have come up with, I do a lot of one-to-one support through CEC. And for anyone that's on here now, if you need a one-to-one appointment, you just go into the Book and Advisor tab, and you can see what everyone's specialisms are, and you can book in with the person that suits you best. And out of those, you know, quite confidential one-to-one conversations, what I've noticed is there's questions that come up again and again just now. So given that you know, we're having this in the most interesting of times, like we couldn't have any more interesting, well, we have to hope times can't get any more interesting than this. One of the things that comes up a lot is about the self-employment support, the support that's being offered to self-employed people. A lot of our clients are self-employed, and obviously we're moving into a slightly, even though, you know, even though we're in lockdown at different points in Scotland and England, the government announcements around what the support will be and stuff is the same, and we're moving into like a new area. Could you talk a little bit about what that means?
Yeah, I mean, basically, it's really what's changing, because I think anybody who has been, anybody who's self-employed, freelance, and should have already been through that first phase of claiming the self-employed income support scheme. So the idea was HMRC would contact everybody. You didn't have to, and then you had to, once they contacted you, could apply within a certain time. You had to, and then you would have got that first 3-month payment. I think one of the key things, what we found is that HMRC did not contact everybody, despite, you know, I had clients phone in saying, I haven't heard anything, am I eligible? When we looked, they met all the criteria. And I think, so it wasn't, you know, there were people missed. So if you haven't received that communication, and you're in those circumstances and you haven't claimed for that initial period, you've got until the 13th of July to make that claim. At 13th of July, that first opportunity disappears.
Okay, that's really good.
From the 14th of July, and really to claim it, all you need to do is to contact HMRC if they haven't been in touch with you. As I said, there's, you know, they did cover an awful lot, but there are people who fell between the stalls and didn't get contacted. So they've had to, we've recommended they contact HMRC direct. The new period starts on the 14th of July. So if you haven't applied for that initial period by 13th of July, that's gone. However, if you are still, if your business is still affected by the virus, then that new period starts and you can claim for that. And that period covers June, July, and through to August. And you apply in July. Now, there is no indication at the moment, the HMRC haven't indicated that they will be contacting everybody like they did the first time. They may, it's still up in the air. They haven't said they will. But I think the fact is that if you know you're still eligible, if you've already claimed for the first period and you know your circumstances haven't changed, then you should, once that new deadline is reached, apply after that date for the next period. What's changing? None of the criteria have changed. For none of the eligibility criteria, none of those have changed whatsoever. Also, what's happened is that, and I think I just lost my camera. One moment.
No,
as always happens. No. Okay.
I don't, yeah, you just, it's, I don't know if you can see that. That kind of means like you're there. We can see a picture. It's not a bad picture. It's sometimes they freeze in very unflattering places, but it's fine. I know.
Okay. Well, I'll carry on anyway.
All right.
Yeah. So, what's changed? I say nothing. None of the criteria have changed.
Right.
But what has changed is obviously the rate at which you're going to get paid. From now on, it was 80% of the average of your profits from the previous 3 years. It's still that same average figure that they're going to apply this to. Nothing's changed on that. But they will be only, it will only be 70% now as for the next 3 months. So the amount that they will pay out has reduced.
Okay. So that, I mean, that definitely means that like the onus is on individuals to be assertive. I know that, and I have clients, I know that like skirt round the times where they need to go talk to HMRC because they're uncomfortable with it. But the reality is nobody's going to put you at the front of the queue for this stuff, is it? You know, if you're aware that you're eligible.
Absolutely.
Then, yeah. Okay.
If you know that you're eligible, keep an eye on it because you will apply. Whether they, hopefully before the new deadline, they will confirm that there is, they will be notifying everybody and contacting everybody. I'd be very surprised if they didn't because, you know, people need that sort of thought. You know, they may know that they're entitled to it, but you know, if HMRC decide it's not cost effective to do it and they've got other priorities, then they won't. So I think the key thing is, again, if you've done it before and you know that you're eligible, keep an eye on that and make sure that you get in touch with them and apply as soon as possible.
And if you, so certainly in the field I work in theatre, it's very common for people to have a mixed set of income that's coming in, and there was a lot of hoo-ha about the fact that lots of people didn't make the 50% of your income condition. But that hasn't changed. So what we're saying is that is that's a separate debate that's raging. But it's this new charge. There has
been no change to those criteria at all. There's been, despite the fact that there's been a lot of pressure put on from certain sectors to try and sort of change it, saying you know it penalizes certain sectors. Unfortunately, that hasn't. They still haven't responded to that. They've sort of kept it exactly as it is.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Now, so the only thing they've done is reduce it from 80% to 70%.
Oh, wahoo. Okay. So good to know that that's the only change. I don't know the legal status of everyone that's in here. Emma, Louise, I'm sorry, my list of names is running off the bottom, so I can't see everybody's names. But if you are, so one of the things that we'll do at this point is we've got, obviously there's self-employed status and the things that pertain to tax and stuff that relates to being self-employed. But we're also going to talk about things like charitable status. Lots of people in the arts work within charitable status, and what, the things that are affecting those. And then the profit-making, companies, the micro businesses as well.
Yes.
If there's something that's specifically of more interest to you and you're sitting listening just now, please feel free to drop that in the chat. So if you're listening to if you're listening to something you go, I actually need to know about, just go ahead and leave us a message, okay? But for now, maybe we can also then talk about, what's coming up for us. You were saying to me that there's a range of different things that we might talk about.
Yes.
But do you want to talk a little bit more about then things like as things are relaxing?
Yeah.
What that means in reality?
Well, I think it's very difficult to know how it's going to affect particular industries, as we were speaking, Sandy, before. I mean, from the point of view of theatre and everything, it's great to have an announcement that theatres will be reopening. However, since you're not allowed to actually put on a live performance, you do actually wonder where the value is in that.
Yes.
And I'm certainly looking forward to going to a musical where nobody's allowed to sing. So, you do wonder how certain things are going to work. Yes, it is relaxing. The hospitality industry, the entertainment industry, they all need far more support, in my view, because they're not the ones that can come back straight away. They're not the ones that can, immediately start selling again. They're in for the long haul, and I think there needs to be a lot more support shown for that. And I think so. If you're in that sector, I think it's not going to be an instant fix.
And you were talking to me about when people have had a bad, like not having thought about at the moment, and I can understand why people are not looking forward yet. We're still in the now. A lot of the time. Also, I see this question that's come up here, Emma. I'm really happy I'll put that in just a minute. The thing of, the reality of what's coming up and what to be ready for in terms of liabilities are.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a financial point of view, and purely because of my specific background with tax, my biggest concern is that a lot of people, there is this, yes, you don't have to pay your second installment of tax if you're self-employed, freelance, and so you don't have to pay that on the 31st of July. And the inland revenue forms that are coming out now, reminders about those payments, are actually specifying that the payment is due on the 31st of January next year. They're actually not saying 31st of July. You can still pay it if you want to at any point before then.
So if somebody doesn't want to take the bigger payment later on and spreading it still makes sense.
Yes. Yeah. I know a lot of clients have said, I've put the money aside, I may as well pay it, I know it's done. And I think, that's everybody down to their own sort of situation. But I think the best sort of piece of advice that I'm trying to encourage a lot of clients to do is work out what do your 1920 personal tax return as soon as possible. And the reason to do that is because 1920 was a full year. If you've had a full year of work in that, so it's only now, it's this year that you're not going to have the income, that your income is going to suffer. So and your liability
getting waived. Is that what you're saying? This is the one that we're thinking that there's adjustments and things on, but in reality there's a solid full financial
financial year that if you've had a good year, that's the tax that you're going to have to be paying next January, along with any deferred payment. So in a way, there's what I'm sort of saying to clients is, look, work out, you get your tax return done, even in draft, to work out what your liabilities are. See how it's impacted. We're already a significant way into this new tax year. Try and do a forecast of what you believe the impact of this will be and what you think your figures will be. In a way, then you've got your 18 months tax liabilities. Sort of, clear, at least in your head, as to what those are going to be, because I think that is key, because HMRC at some point are going to want to start getting their money back in. they're not, this delay, this deferment is only going to be a one-off.
Yes.
Come January, they are going to expect you to make those payments.
Yes.
They will probably have to be open to people making payment arrangements, but
Yeah.
ultimately you're always then going to be playing catch up.
Yes.
So I
And
think
that's the thing, isn't it? Is like, because it's a long game, because a lot of what we've been, when it comes to actual income generation, for a lot of people, they're stuck in limbo. It's important to remember that a lot of the machinery is working retroactively, and actually these things are in the mail. These things are going to continue,
yes,
regardless of whether other decisions around what we can and can't do haven't settled down.
absolutely.
Yeah.
In most of these cases, and it's the same with companies, and it's the same with VAT, if you're VAT registered, these are deferrals. They're
Yeah.
not, those bills are still going to be there at the end of the day.
Yes.
And in this current year,
Yeah.
the income you receive in this current year is likely to be less. Now,
Yes.
it may well mean that, for the next 18 months after that, your tax liabilities are fairly low, because your income will have fallen. But you've still got this one period where there is going to be sort of, between January, March next year, depending on whether you're self-employed or a limited company, there are going to be significant tax liabilities arising.
Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of things coming to roost in the start of 2021. Yeah, I've got a question here that Emma put up. It's fine that it's very specific. It'll be specific to lots of people, and it is. I've heard this question before, Emma. It's one of the reasons I'm happy to take it. It says, I'm interested in knowing about being freelance. I'm furloughed from a part-time job, and I've worked unpaid as an artist till now. Now I'm being paid as freelance, but not registered as self-employed yet, and I'm lost what to do. So, Emma, do you want to unmute yourself and just expand on that a little bit?
Hi, thank you.
Hi.
It is very specific, but I thought this was the best place to ask it, because I do have a meeting set up with you, Sandy, and I thought Peter's the guy to ask. So I graduated last year from art school, and I've not been paid for anything up until now. And now I'm working as a virtual artist in residence, but I'm part-time at my old job, which I'm actually going to be made redundant for in a couple of months as well. Right. Confusing, but I'm being paid as a freelance artist in residence from a company or an organisation. I think they're a charity, and yeah, I've never registered. I'm not really sure what I'm doing. I think I need to pay tax, or I don't know if they pay it. I don't know. I'm a bit confused.
If you're freelance, if you are freelance and self-employed, then you will be responsible for your tax on that income. In theory, you are supposed to notify HMRC within 3 months of the date you started self-employment. If that was post 5th of April, then in effect, the first tax return you might have to do would be next year. So not telling them until possibly even February, March next year is not going to create a problem. So there is a 3 month rule.
I've only been doing it for a month, so
okay, fine.
And it's just like a short contract. It's only for 3 months.
Right. It depends on what your other circumstances are for the rest of this tax year. But in theory, if it's a short period of time, what might be an advantage for you to do is to actually wait until February next year. That's when you'd need to notify HMRC and register for self-assessment. But if you've had other income on which you've paid tax, so a part-time job or anything else that you might do between now and next April, and let's say that your freelance income was relatively small, it may well be that there are more expenses that you can offset against it, and that turns it into a loss. And if you've paid tax on other income, you can use that loss to get tax back. But it's something that probably needs, I know that sounds a bit complex, because you can always, if you've got, for example, if the first thing you do, if somebody earns £1,500 and they got equipment that was worth 2,000, you'd claim the equipment and straight away you've got a £500 loss. Mm-hmm. Now you can set that loss against any other income that you've got that you've paid tax on.
And it wouldn't include, so they've paid for some of my expenses, So I wouldn't include that, I'm guessing.
Any expenses that you get reimbursed or they pay for, then you need to recognise that as income, but then also as an expense, because obviously you received it as income. So
Okay.
yes, it is. You know, you always looking. I'm always looking to sort of try and, you know, if somebody's starting in business, in freelance or something, in that early period, you know, there's a very good chance you're going to make a loss, because it's surprising what expenses you can claim for at the beginning. And that loss can be useful if you've got other income where you're paying tax.
So you would say don't register as
I would say hold fire.
self-employed.
Yeah, hold fire for now.
And then when would I know when to do it, or if to do it? Like what would mean?
I think, well, I think if at the end of it really depends on the level of income that you're going to be receiving for this contract, and then if it continues. If it was a one-off, and you looked at the number and you thought, well, if I claim for my laptop and a few other expenses, then I haven't got a liability, I would actually say it's probably not worthwhile registering, because there's no tax implications.
I think there probably will be.
Yeah. But in that case, what I'd suggest is get further through the tax year, see what you're doing post this. If you're then doing more freelance work, then obviously there's no question about that. If you're going back in, if you are made redundant, hopefully that doesn't happen, but if you are, then you get a further employment. Then again, assess the situation round about February.
Okay.
Get an idea of what your tax position. And you can always drop me an email at that point and say, Peter, what do I do?
I can put Emma, what I can do is when we have our appointment, I can give you Peter's email address, and as you're going through it, if there are more questions you can have. But I also would say, just speaking broadly, and you can tell me if this is wrong, Peter, but speaking from the artist tax numpty point of view, which is where I came from, it's like your first year of business, there's all sorts of random kind of setup costs and things that you can claim as expenses that you can't claim for in other years. Is that right?
There are a lot of additional expenses in that first year, and there's a lot of things that people don't think about. And you know, it's like everybody will have a computer, a laptop, possibly a printer, and everything. And the minute you start into business, the first thing you do is bring that as you claim for that as a business asset. Now that's you don't need to do anything formal to recognise that. You just put it on your tax return. If you're a limited company, the first thing you do is effectively the company buys it off you, and the money. And you know, if it's, let's say it's £2,000, the first £2,000 you take money out of the company is buying that from you.
So in reality, unless you're on your way to the Venice Biennale or something, like there's bound to be ways to do this.
There are.
I think it's what we're saying on the rates that artists are usually paid in their first year,
yes.
Where you're looking at.
And the key thing is in a lot of those cases, that very much you are going to, you know, it's quite often the case that by the time you add those expenses up, because if you've set up websites, if you've done anything like that to promote the business that you're going to start, you know, all those costs, pre-trading costs, can be brought in, and quite often you find that is a loss, and a lot of people are doing this alongside the day job, if you like, and paying tax on that. And if you make that loss, then you can claim tax back.
See these pre-trading costs or business assets, how long ago are you allowed to, like, say you bought them like 4 years ago before you started trading, for instance?
You need to, it really depends on what they are. It really depends.
Like if it's like a laptop.
If it's I always say to people, if it's a laptop, look, and it's quite old, and people go, oh, I've had it 3-4 years. I always say, well, look, what would it cost you to get a new one now if you were to get a new one for your business? And let's attribute that replacement value now at that cost.
And again, let's say most artists I know, what that means is that wipes out at least the first 3 jobs. You know, by the time you put all the things together that you need to work like operationally, unless you're in a network where all your marketing is word of mouth, it seems like even the most basic of kind of setups for things makes a difference.
Yeah. Sandy, just on that particular point, particularly for Emma and anybody else it might apply to, I think you've got the sort of pamphlet that I produced for Shift last year.
Right.
If you've got that, I mean, Emma, for example, that will answer a lot of your questions. It tells you the type of expenditure you can claim, and it covers what you need to do.
What
So
we'll do is we'll find a way to provide.
if not, I'll send it. I'll send it up to you again, Sandy, just so that you got it as an
and
email.
then I can.
And anybody, and you know,
Thank you so
it
much.
covers all the sort of basics.
That's really helpful. And what we do, just so that you know, on the CEC website, there's lots of different groups. There's lots of the way that people work with each other in our network is that when you've got a membership profile, you can join one of the groups. And what happens is I'm constantly updating things like there's a group specifically for freelancers. So when there's a piece of information that comes in that's useful, I post it up there. And although that means you do have to go through all the information to find things, there's that. I also run one that specifically is for like performance and theatre and, you know, the sector that I know really well, and one for companies. So depending on what the structure is, each of the times that we're finding information that's useful, we're posting it up in the groups. And then we're also putting it across often into resources. So there's a little resources tab where you'll get a little two-minute blog article and then put something up. So what I'll do, Peter, is I'll pop that in. When you send that to me, I'll pop that into the group, and then I'll put a little blog up in the resources so people can get to it. Because it is a bewildering, when you start this, it is confusing about
starting up. If you're starting up in business for the first time, then it's probably the most complex area to think about. And I think what I get upset about is that people miss the opportunities. So I try and make sure that I put as much out there to sort of make sure that, you know, those opportunities, everybody takes advantage of that. And because you need every penny and every bit of help when you're starting up.
Absolutely. And there isn't, for obvious reasons, HMRC don't make a big noise about the fact that your first year is like this Willy Wonka year where there's like all these amazing, you know, you'll eventually go past the window where you're allowed to claim for things that you've previously done. But in
HMRC's guidance is good, but it's very one-sided.
Yes, but it is there, which I suppose is the other thing that is worth us saying, isn't it? Is that you're a specialist in this, and you've worked in this field for a long time. But there are a lot of HMRC resources out there in terms of like understanding the basic principles and stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. You know, so
absolutely. The HMRC resources are far better than they used to be.
Yes.
But you need to go into with them an open mind in that they're not going to give you advice. They're not going to say what you can do with claiming your laptop and things like that. And so they're not going to do that. And you know, their tax is this huge grey area. It's not black and white, and therefore, you know, and they are going to interpret it their way. So, you know, just always bear that in mind. But yes, their resources are an awful lot better than they used to be.
Yes, there's definitely, I think the thing of if there's a YouTube video for it, you're immediately more engaged than trying to wade through one of the forums. So another question from Emma, but I know it's relevant, is that as somebody who's newly self-employed, would she, depending on the date that she's self-employed, would she come under the self-employed support scheme if she hasn't got previous self-employed earnings?
Unfortunately not. I mean, that's one of the criteria, is that you have to have been anybody new coming to self-employment, anybody who in last year that came to self-employment is not eligible for that support.
Right, okay. So that, and this is one of the things that, again, it's contentious, and there are conversations going on around the fact that anybody that didn't have the full year was initially struggling to have any kind of conversation about how they would get support. So even if you'd had a very successful first year, there wasn't you know, there's definitely holes in the system, is what we're saying.
Absolutely. It's designed to, I guess, catch as many as possible, but you're always going to have quite a few falling through that net that don't.
And proportionally, the arts has a higher proportion of people who are falling through the net than most other sectors, just because of the virtue of the fact that many people do work with a side gig that's PAYE and with self-employment, which fluctuates enormously from year to year. You think this is interesting, you wait until you've had a good year, because then everything happens where they're like, what are you doing now? I always feel like it kicks off like little alarms all over the place. So the lack of consistency, I think, in arts earnings is often one of the challenges, because it just means we're very hard to predict. And the criteria for success is not always year-on-year income growth. There's other criteria for success that people put ahead of that. Oh, hello. Hold on. Are you joining us again? So give us a second, chaps. Let me see what's going on here. What? Okay. I'm happy to gather questions while Peter works out how to rejoin us. This is the second time this has happened to me this week. There we are. You're back. Can't hear you, but we're there. There's definitely a moving picture. That's a bonus. Can I unmute you? There you go.
Right.
Hey!
My apologies for that. I thought being in the office, I thought I'd go into the office because the internet will be much better there. And I found out it's not. We should have stayed at home.
Never mind. At least people aren't coming in and asking you if they can have a sandwich, which is what's happening to me quite a bit of the
So
time.
I do apologise about that.
So, so we've got about 10 minutes left. So again, I would say to people, if there's anything that you need to ask, do go ahead and drop it into the box. But can we talk a little bit, just Peter, until there's anything else from anyone, about the realities of furloughing people and being furloughed, like how that's working? Well, we have a look at that and just where that's going just now, because I know that's something that a lot of people are trying to deal with as well.
I mean,
either as new managers who are having to furlough, or as people who are being furloughed and are now moving into, 2 or 3 months of this having, like the realities of that being. I know there was a cut-off date recently around furloughing. But could you talk a little bit about, your picture's frozen, are you still there? Okay, Peter, we can't hear you. Maybe, see, this will be a riot. Let's see, is there any way to do this off of your phone? Maybe just turn the video off, good suggestion. Yeah. In the meantime, because I'm sure he's dealing with, so what happens, you go to a central office thinking this will be the best thing to do. Never mind. The kinds of things that have come up for other people when I've been talking to them is, lots of arts organisations have charitable status and have boards of directors. So often one of the questions that I'm getting that I was going to ask Peter to look at was things like, if you're the only person who's running a charity and you're being furloughed. Hello there. How you doing? I think you're doing very well not to swear. I think what I'm impressed with at the moment is the lack of the language. I said, do you want to try turn on your video off, Peter, and maybe we just get your audio? Does that work?
Yeah,
Does that help?
Because I think that may be okay.
Yeah.
Let's try that.
Yeah. Okay. There we go. We can hear you fine.
Right.
So
okay.
We were just talking about the realities of furlough. Yeah.
Yeah. So furloughing, basically, it depends. I don't know circumstances, but obviously there was the big issue about directors and furloughing. And that's thankfully got resolved, except that obviously if you are running your own company and you are only taking the basic salary and dividends, you're still one of the people who is in the worst scenario, if you like, because the nominal salaries that were put through, you're only going to be getting a percentage of that. Now, obviously, furlough has again been continued, but again at a reduced rate. So the rate has gone down from 80 to 70% that they'll support, with the employer either accepting just that they're going to pay that 70% rate or topping it up. So there is now more onus on the employer to meet that additional 10%. And it will have to be phased out. It can't be sort of dropped overnight. So there is going to have to be a phased reduction in this, and that's what's happening at the moment. That's what's proposed at the moment. It is slightly worrying. I think the not to be a scaremonger, but I think the problem will come when they do decide that it gets down to, they start to bring it down to quite low levels. And I think when you get it down to those sort of lower percentages that the government are funding, which ultimately they'll have to do because it can't be indefinite, what you're then going to have is businesses that still haven't, particularly in theatre, particularly in entertainment, in hospitality, that can't get back 100% on their feet straight away. They're going to have real problems.
Yes, and I think that's, realistically from industry to industry, what I'm seeing is that people are thinking about what their, what a period of restructuring looks like while they get back up to strength. and the reality is in theatre, certainly redundancies are already happening.
Yes.
And I can see how, but I can equally see how in industries that are made up of a lot of organisations where maybe there's not lots of staff to furlough, you've got maybe a director and 2 or 3 staff, like that's a really common size for a creative charity or creative business. I mean, the other, like, part of the question is operationally, and this is just something because I don't understand how it works either. Operationally, if everyone's off on furlough, are organisations expected to not be functioning, or is it just about the individuals?
Yeah, no, I mean, the effect, the rule basically is that, that obviously if an employee is furloughed, they are not expected to, they cannot do anything at all for that company. Right. Now, the issue then comes to the directors and the owners of the businesses. And if they've furloughed, the problem there is that what HMRC clarified is that you can do your director's duties. So in other words, if your accounts are due and need to be filed, if you need to complete any regulatory forms or anything like that, you can do those.
Because the administration of furloughing other people creates paperwork, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And then you then have to look and say, well, if you're a director, you run the payroll for, you've got one employee, you run the payroll for the person, are you then breaking the furlough rule? No, I'd say no, because you've still got to operate. That is an operational procedure. Yeah. I think the key thing that that I got from it when they first announced it, and I've looked at it since, is that you can't do anything that generates any income.
Yes, right.
So basically, you cannot go and look for new clients. You can't, anything that potentially would generate new income it would immediately be in breach of the furlough regulations.
Yeah. Yeah.
So dealing with the administration side of things, and if you've got staff, if you're a director and you're furloughed, but you've got staff who are still working, clearly you need to manage them. And managing them is one thing, but actually provided you're not directly doing anything to generate income, you're literally mainly sort of dictating what they need to do on a daily basis and controlling what they do.
Yeah.
It's a fine line.
Yeah.
But I think that's the key to it, is think, am I doing anything that's going to then generate income for this business? In which case you would need to come off furlough yourself.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Now, we've only got a couple of minutes left. So and thank you. I've got a thing in here from Louise saying that for those who are newly self-employed, people like Ayrshire Council have one-off help that you can apply for if you're in that area. And again, in the chat, in the group for self-employed people, anytime that I found any scheme that looked like it plugged the gap, I put a listing up to that. So I'll add that one, I'll look for that one and look at it there. But sector by sector as well as geographic, yeah? Like you might find that your unions, there's sector by sector, there's different funds available to help plug the gap for all sorts of people, because
what you're finding is that although there's obviously a lot of it's coming from central government, there are a lot of other organisations and local and regional organisations that are actually bringing in their own schemes where it affects a large part of their particular business community. You're finding that I know down here at the Marlow where we are, the local council has put some funding out for certain businesses. So it is you do need to do that, and obviously sadly I don't know all of those because they're sort of different nationwide, but there are local schemes as well as the national schemes.
And it's a bit like looking for funding at any point. It's like a great big patchwork quilt that's unique to the individual, isn't it? So it's really about finding out where you sit in the Venn diagram of all the overlapping circles. But I do think that one of the things that artists often do is they don't think of themselves as a business often enough. No. So in reality, there are business funds sometimes available, and I think
that's the point. I think if you're self-employed, if you're self-employed freelance, you are still entitled to bounce back loans.
Yes.
Right. And those, and a lot of people don't necessarily think of that. They think, well, that's only for companies, but actually those bounce back loans, and you don't need to. A lot of people have taken them out, and literally just sitting on that money, having that security.
Yes,
one tip. Don't take the money and pay your tax with it.
Yes.
That's because apart from anything else, were anything to go seriously wrong and you go, oh dear, nothing, it's not working, the taxman are the last people who would come after you. So
yes.
yeah,
Absolutely. Well, I think we've run up to time, Peter. Thanks so much.
Sorry, I do apologise to everybody for the fact that my internet decided it was going to throw wobbly for a couple of times. But
I just want you to go back and watch the recording and look at my face at the point where I thought that I was answering the financial questions, because I think that's a comedy moment for everybody. But thank you very much, Peter. Again, if anyone has any issues, you can get in touch with me via the CEC website. I'm on there. I'm on the community. If you need Peter's email for follow-up questions, happy to do that. If it's raised any questions for you that are kind of bigger than that and you need business support in any kind of way to kind of get a thinking space around what you're doing, that's absolutely what the one-to-one support is around. And what I would say to everyone is, if you haven't already, fill in your profile properly on the CEC website, because actually the people who have are forming communities and helping each other, but people need to know who you are, what you do and what you're needing and what you give, and that helps. And a lot of the time I see people with just a name and a phone number, and actually there's about 1,000 people in that community now, and they're all specialists in something. Peter, thank you again for all of this. You're the only person that ever makes tax interesting for me, I gotta tell you.
Pleasure, thank you all.
And now I have to end the session. It's very abrupt. It's like getting flung out of a pub. So I'm going to say goodbye to everybody.
I'm looking forward to that.
Bye-bye.
Bye.